In today's episode, we're examining 5 fatal animal attacks caused by poor decisions. From an elderly hiker who took a wrong turn in grizzly country, to an Arctic researcher whose storm shelter failed when he needed it most. But first, we start in the Florida Everglades, where one teenager's reckless behavior turned a family outing into tragedy. It was July 15, 2016, at a public viewing lagoon off a boardwalk in Everglades National Park, Florida. Heat shimmered over shallow, brackish water bordered by mangroves, buttonwood, and mats of sawgrass. Wading birds worked the edges, and mullet flashed in tight schools just beneath the surface. Posted signs warned visitors to stay back from the waterline and to remain on the planks, where railings and distance kept people separate from the wildlife that used the narrow, muddy shallows as ambush corridors. The Kincaid family had come on a day off to walk the loop and point out wetland species. The father knew the area well from his ranger work. The mother kept their youngest close, and their teenager Tallulah moved ahead with quick steps. Earlier on the trail, they had watched an alligator slide from a bank, and talk turned to the differences between the freshwater alligator and the rarer coastal American crocodile that favored this estuarine pocket. The place felt deceptively calm. Still water film, cicadas, distant thunderheads building over the bay. The family's purpose was simple: a short educational stop before the afternoon storms. The warning signs, the proximity of open water to low, slick mud, and the visibility of basking reptiles along the margins together set a clear boundary that many visitors observed, a boundary that in this case would be crossed. The American crocodile is a large, primarily nocturnal ambush predator that rests motionless along edges where land and water meet. It detects prey through vibration and pressure changes and can transition from stillness to a short, explosive surge in a fraction of a second. In shallow water, its preferred tactic is a forward lunge, jaws closing on a limb or body part, followed by a backward pull to deeper water and rotational maneuvers that disable and disorient. Death rolls do not always dismember. They serve to destabilize and to remove leverage from anything resisting at the edge. A crocodile that appears inert can be within striking distance if a person stands or leans close enough to the water with feet on the slick bank. Although American crocodiles tend to avoid heavily trafficked boardwalk areas, individuals occasionally rest near shallow public lagoons, particularly juveniles and subadults that use predictable warm water pockets. Adult crocs typically remain more wary of large groups of people, but individual animals can habituate enough to lie within view of walkways. Tallulah left the boardwalk at a gap in the railing where a beaten footpath ran a few yards to the lagoon edge. She picked up a stick and threw small debris at a crocodile lying partly submerged with its tail and a portion of its back exposed. She stepped within 2 to 3 feet of the waterline and extended the stick toward the animal, tapping the surface. The trigger was the disturbance at close range combined with her location inside the crocodile's reach. The animal surged forward in a short, explosive burst, water pushing outward in a low wave as the jaws opened. The bite closed across her lower right leg and ankle. The force pulled her forward. Mud gave way underfoot and she lost her stance. The crocodile immediately reversed toward deeper water. As her body entered the shallows, it initiated a rotational maneuver. The first roll torqued the lower limb, producing fractures around the ankle and lower leg and stripping her of any ability to stand. She went into chest-deep water, still held by the bite. The crocodile paused its rotation briefly, maintaining its grip. Rather than continuing multiple full rolls, which are uncommon unless the animal is attempting to dismember prey, it used small twisting motions to destabilize her and pull her farther from the edge. The second rotation submerged her completely, displacing air and removing orientation. Attempts from the boardwalk to reach her with hands were impossible due to distance and the animal's control of the movement. The crocodile did not release. It maintained the hold and continued short, controlled spins that kept her below the surface. Soft tissue damage compounded with the fractures, and water entered her airway. Within minutes, the combination of submersion and the inability to gain leverage led to drowning. When the crocodile stopped rotating, it maintained a stationary hold in slightly deeper water until human presence along the shore diminished. The sequence followed the species' known pattern: rapid strike at the edge, backward pull, rotational disabling, and submergence until there was no further resistance. Response began within minutes. Bystanders alerted rangers, who closed the boardwalk, coordinated with wildlife officers, and staged a recovery using boats and poles from a safer access point downstream. A search of the lagoon located the crocodile still in the vicinity. Non-lethal hazing moved it away so divers could enter. The medical examiner documented drowning as the primary cause of death, with contributory blunt and crushing trauma to the right lower limb, consistent with a crocodilian bite and rotational force. Park officials reviewed signage, rail placement, and informal footpaths leading off the boardwalk. Additional fencing and clearer visual barriers were added, and staff increased patrols at high-use pullouts during peak hours. Public reaction included calls for stricter enforcement at popular wildlife overlooks and renewed education about edge distance, especially where shallow mudslopes lead directly into inhabited water. The family released a short statement through the Park Service asking visitors to respect posted limits and the hazards of standing close to water in crocodile habitat. While Tallulah's case unfolded in the humid lowlands of Florida, our next incident moves to the mountain wilderness of Montana, where an elderly hiker named Orrin Miller would encounter a very different but equally dangerous predator in the dense brush of Glacier National Park. It was September 3, 2017, in Glacier National Park, Montana, where autumn had begun to paint the high country in shades of gold and crimson. The morning air carried the crisp bite of approaching winter, and frost still clung to shadowed patches of grass along the trail system. Dense stands of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir created corridors of filtered sunlight, while thick undergrowth of huckleberry bushes offered the last sweet fruit before the season turned. Orrin Miller, a 67-year-old retired librarian from Portland, had driven up alone for what he considered a routine hike on paths he had walked for 2 decades. His family knew him as methodical and careful, a gentleman who had never missed his annual pilgrimage to these mountains. What they did not fully understand was that his memory had begun to falter in subtle ways, creating gaps in his usually reliable navigation skills. He carried no bear spray that morning, confident in his familiarity with the area and his long history of peaceful encounters with wildlife. The trail he intended to follow was well marked and heavily used, but the network of intersecting paths and old logging roads created opportunities for confusion. Thick brush limited visibility in many sections, and the abundance of ripe berries had drawn both human visitors and the park's substantial grizzly population to the same general area. The combination of reduced mental clarity, dense vegetation, and active bear feeding zones would prove catastrophic. Grizzly bears in late summer and early fall focus intensively on hyperphagia, the process of consuming massive quantities of food to build fat reserves for winter hibernation. Sows with cubs of the year are particularly defensive during this period, as they must protect their offspring while competing for limited high-calorie food sources. A female grizzly with cubs will typically establish a feeding territory around productive berry patches and respond aggressively to any perceived threat within that zone. These bears rely on their exceptional hearing and sense of smell to detect approaching danger, but dense vegetation can create situations where humans and bears encounter each other at dangerously close range. When surprised or cornered, a protective sow will launch a defensive attack designed to neutralize the threat and create distance for her cubs to escape. Orrin missed a familiar trail junction and continued into increasingly thick brush, following what appeared to be a maintained path, but was actually an old game trail. He pushed through waist-high huckleberry bushes heavy with fruit, unaware that he was approaching an active feeding site. A female grizzly with 2 cubs of the year had been working the patch for several hours, methodically stripping berries while her offspring played and fed nearby. The wind direction prevented the bear from detecting Orrin's approach until he stepped into a small clearing less than 20 yards from the family group. The sudden appearance of a human triggered an immediate defensive response. The sow charged without hesitation, covering the distance in seconds. Her massive forepaw struck Orrin's chest with tremendous force, knocking him backward and causing him to stumble into a fallen log. The impact shattered multiple ribs and drove fragments into his lung tissue. As he fell, the bear followed up with a bite to his left shoulder, her powerful jaws crushing the collarbone and tearing through muscle and tendons. She then raked her claws across his torso, opening deep parallel wounds from his chest to his abdomen. The bear's weight pressed down on his broken ribs, forcing air from his punctured lung and preventing him from drawing breath. Blood filled his chest cavity as internal bleeding accelerated. The bear delivered a final bite to his head, causing severe cranial trauma. Defensive grizzly attacks often involve powerful bites to disable a perceived threat before withdrawing. The entire attack lasted less than 30 seconds. Death resulted from the combination of severe head injuries, massive internal bleeding, and respiratory failure caused by the punctured lung and crushed chest. Search and rescue teams located Oren's body the following morning after his failure to return prompted a missing person report. The scene showed clear evidence of a defensive bear attack, with tracks and scat confirming the presence of a sow with cubs in the immediate area. Park officials temporarily closed several trails while wildlife specialists monitored bear activity and assessed public safety risks. The medical examiner's report documented multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a grizzly bear mauling, emphasizing the defensive nature of the encounter. Oren's family released a statement expressing their understanding that the bear was protecting her cubs and requested that no action be taken against the animal. The incident prompted renewed discussions about mandatory bear spray requirements and improved trail signage in high-density bear habitat. Park Service officials enhanced their educational programs about proper food storage and hiking protocols in bear country, while also reviewing trail maintenance schedules to ensure adequate sightlines in areas where bears and humans frequently intersect. Oren Miller's encounter with a protective grizzly ended tragically in the Montana wilderness. Another researcher named Cassian Bell would soon face his own deadly challenge in the warm waters of the Bahamas. It was October 12, 2015, at a research site off the Bahamas where coral reefs dropped into deep blue water and currents carried nutrients that attracted both small fish and the predators that hunted them. The morning sun penetrated 30 feet down through crystal clear water, illuminating brain coral formations and schools of yellowtail snappers that moved in synchronized waves across the reef face. Cassian Bell, a 29-year-old marine biologist from Australia, had arrived with 2 graduate students to continue behavioral observations of a tagged tiger shark that frequented this particular section of reef. The research vessel anchored in 60 feet of water, where the bottom transitioned from coral to sand, creating an ideal observation platform for studying shark feeding patterns and territorial behavior. Cassian had spent 8 years working with dangerous marine species without serious incident, building a reputation for methodical safety protocols and respect for the animals he studied. His rebreather system allowed for extended bottom time and minimal bubble disturbance, making it perfect for close-range behavioral documentation. The morning dive plan called for a 40-minute observation session at depth, with the tagged shark already located and displaying normal hunting behavior near a cleaning station. Unknown to the team, recent equipment maintenance had introduced a subtle fault in the rebreather's carbon dioxide scrubbing system that would manifest only under specific depth and exertion conditions. Tiger sharks are opportunistic apex predators that rely on electrical sensitivity, vibration detection, and visual cues to locate prey. They are particularly responsive to erratic movement patterns and surface disturbance, which often indicate injured or distressed animals. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are more likely to investigate unusual stimuli through direct contact, using their powerful jaws to test potential food sources. Their hunting strategy involves approaching from below or from the side, using their broad, serrated teeth to deliver devastating bite wounds that cause rapid blood loss and incapacitation. At 40 feet depth, Cassian's rebreather began accumulating carbon dioxide beyond safe levels due to the scrubber malfunction. The buildup triggered an emergency response as his body detected the dangerous gas concentration. He initiated an immediate ascent, rising far faster than recommended for controlled rebreather diving, prioritizing escape over normal ascent discipline. Upon reaching the surface, his buoyancy compensator failed to inflate properly due to a jammed inflator mechanism, and his integrated weight system refused to release when activated. Unable to achieve positive buoyancy, he began kicking frantically to stay afloat while attempting to orally inflate his vest. The violent surface activity occurred directly above the area where the tagged tiger shark had been feeding. The 14-foot female detected the commotion and approached from below, drawn by the irregular splashing and electrical signatures from his struggling movements. The shark's initial approach was investigatory, but the continued surface disturbance triggered a feeding response. The tiger shark struck from beneath, its jaws closing around Cassian's lower torso and right hip. The bite force crushed his pelvis and severed major blood vessels in his groin area. The shark's serrated teeth created massive tissue damage as it shook its head from side to side before releasing him. Blood dispersed rapidly in the water as Cassian lost motor control in his lower body. The shark circled back within seconds, attracted by the blood trail and continued movement. The shark returned moments later, drawn back by the heavy blood plume, and delivered a second bite to his upper thigh. The massive blood loss caused rapid unconsciousness, as his blood pressure dropped catastrophically. Unable to maintain buoyancy with his damaged equipment and failing strength, Cassian slipped beneath the surface. Water entered his lungs as he lost the ability to coordinate breathing. Death occurred from a combination of massive hemorrhage, drowning, and traumatic shock within minutes of the initial attack. The graduate students on the research vessel immediately activated emergency protocols when they observed the surface disturbance and blood in the water. Coast Guard rescue teams arrived within 20 minutes, but could only recover Cassian's body from the seafloor using remotely operated equipment. Investigation revealed the rebreather malfunction and buoyancy system failures that had created the emergency situation. The equipment manufacturer issued a safety bulletin regarding the specific scrubber component that had failed, leading to enhanced inspection protocols for research diving operations. Cassian's family established a scholarship fund for marine biology students, emphasizing the importance of equipment redundancy and emergency training. The ocean depths claimed Cassian Bell through equipment failure, while in Ohio, zookeeper Juniper Blake would soon learn that even controlled environments become lethal when safety systems malfunction. It was March 8, 2018, at the Metropolitan Zoo in Ohio, where concrete enclosures and reinforced glass barriers created artificial habitats for some of the world's most powerful primates. The facility housed a troop of western lowland gorillas in a complex system of indoor holding areas, connected to outdoor exhibits through sliding doors and transfer tunnels. Morning routines began before public hours, with keepers conducting health checks and performing maintenance tasks that required temporary separation of animals from their living spaces. Juniper Blake, a 24-year-old zookeeper and primatology student, had worked with this particular gorilla troop for 3 years, developing what she believed was a mutual understanding with each individual animal. Her colleagues respected her patience and gentle approach, noting how the gorillas seemed calmer during her shifts. The facility operated under strict protocols that mandated protected contact between humans and great apes, with multiple redundant safety systems designed to prevent direct encounters. Electronic locks controlled all access points, backed up by manual bolt systems that required physical engagement to secure. Recent power fluctuations had triggered intermittent faults in the electronic systems, prompting maintenance crews to inspect and reset various components throughout the week. The morning shift change had created a brief communication gap regarding the status of certain manual locks. Juniper entered what she believed was a secure maintenance corridor to clean and restock enrichment materials, following standard procedures that had been routine for years. The combination of electronic malfunction and human oversight had created a scenario that the facility's safety protocols were designed to prevent. Silverback gorillas are immensely powerful animals capable of generating tremendous force through their muscular arms and hands. Adult males can weigh up to 400 pounds and possess strength estimated at 10 times that of an average human. Despite their generally peaceful nature, gorillas are highly territorial and will respond aggressively to perceived threats within their domain. When startled or confronted unexpectedly, a silverback's defensive response involves rapid charging, grabbing, and striking with enough force to cause severe blunt trauma. Their massive hands can crush bones, while their powerful arms can throw adult humans significant distances. Juniper had completed half of her cleaning routine when Kibo, the troop's 400-pound silverback, appeared suddenly around a corner in the service corridor. The electronic lock failure had allowed him access to an area that should have remained sealed, while the manual backup bolt had not been properly engaged during the previous shift. The unexpected encounter startled both human and animal in the narrow concrete space. Kibo's territorial instincts triggered an immediate aggressive response to what he perceived as an intrusion into his domain. He charged forward and grabbed Juniper's left arm with his massive hand, the grip force instantly fracturing her radius and ulna bones. The silverback then lifted and threw her against the concrete wall with tremendous force. Her shoulders separated on impact as she crashed to the floor, multiple ribs cracking against the unforgiving surface. Kibo followed up by grabbing her leg and dragging her across the rough concrete, the abrasive surface tearing through her uniform and skin. He then positioned himself over her prone form and delivered a series of crushing, open-handed strikes and slams, the typical method by which silverbacks overpower threats. The impacts fractured several vertebrae and caused massive internal bleeding as organs were compressed against the rib cage. A final strike to her chest compressed her heart and lungs, causing immediate cardiac arrest. The entire attack lasted less than 2 minutes, with Kibo's overwhelming physical superiority making resistance impossible. Death resulted from multiple traumatic injuries, including spinal fractures, internal hemorrhaging, and cardiac trauma, caused by the sustained blunt force assault. Zoo emergency protocols activated immediately when motion sensors detected unusual activity in the corridor. Security teams used remote systems to guide Kibo back to his holding area, while medical personnel attempted resuscitation. Paramedics pronounced Juniper dead at the scene due to the severity of her injuries. The facility underwent immediate lockdown pending investigation by both zoo authorities and occupational safety officials. Examination revealed the dual failure of electronic and manual security systems that had created the fatal breach. The zoo implemented enhanced redundancy measures, including mandatory dual-person verification for all lock systems and upgraded electronic monitoring with battery backup power. Juniper's family established a memorial fund supporting primate research and keeper safety training programs. Technology failures claimed Juniper Blake within zoo walls. In the Canadian Arctic, environmental scientist Gideon Stone would face his own crisis when a violent storm destroyed his research station's defenses, exposing him to a deadly predator. It was August 22, 2016, at a remote Arctic research station in northern Canada, where endless expanses of tundra stretched beneath a sky that never fully darkened during the brief summer season. The landscape consisted of permafrost, scattered boulders, and low-growing vegetation that provided little shelter from the constant wind. Temperatures hovered just above freezing even in late summer, while the proximity to Hudson Bay created unpredictable weather patterns that could shift from calm to violent within hours. Gideon Stone, a 32-year-old climate researcher and environmental activist, had established the temporary camp with his wife Sarah to conduct a population study of polar bears in the region. Their work focused on documenting the effects of reduced sea ice on bear behavior and hunting patterns, research that Gideon believed could influence conservation policy. The couple had spent 2 years in polar bear country, learning to respect the animals while maintaining safe distances through proper protocols. Their camp consisted of reinforced shelters, a perimeter bear fence powered by solar batteries, and tripwire alarm systems designed to detect approaching wildlife. Emergency equipment included flares, air horns, and satellite communication devices for evacuation requests. The research had proceeded without major incidents, with several bears observed and documented from safe distances. Recent weather reports had warned of an approaching storm system, but the couple decided to remain in position to complete their final data collection before the season ended. The storm's intensity exceeded all forecasts, bringing sustained winds that would test every piece of equipment designed to keep the researchers safe from the region's apex predator. Polar bears are the largest terrestrial carnivores, with adult males weighing up to 800 pounds and possessing incredible strength adapted for hunting seals on sea ice. During ice-free periods, these bears face starvation as their primary food sources become inaccessible, driving them to seek alternative nutrition wherever available. Hungry polar bears will investigate any potential food source, including human camps, and their powerful sense of smell can detect scents from miles away. Unlike other bear species, polar bears show little fear of humans and will actively stalk potential prey. Their hunting strategy involves patient stalking, followed by explosive bursts of speed, using their massive paws and jaws to deliver fatal attacks. A polar bear's bite force exceeds that of any other bear species, while their claws can tear through most materials with ease. The storm struck with unprecedented fury, generating winds exceeding 80 miles per hour that collapsed sections of the research shelter and tore down large portions of the bear fence. Tripwire alarms failed as their power connections severed, while blowing snow reduced visibility to mere feet. Gideon emerged from the damaged shelter to attempt emergency radio repairs, knowing that their satellite communication represented their only link to rescue services. The howling wind masked all sound as he worked frantically to restore contact with the outside world. An undernourished male polar bear, driven by extreme hunger after weeks without successful hunting, had been tracking the camp's scent for hours through the deteriorating weather. The storm provided perfect cover for his approach, allowing him to move within striking distance undetected. The bear's massive form materialized from the swirling snow as Gideon knelt beside the radio equipment. The attack came without warning as the bear struck from behind, his enormous paw slamming into Gideon's back with crushing force. The impact drove him face first into the frozen ground, fracturing his skull against the hard-packed snow. The bear's claws raked across his spine, tearing through his heavy winter clothing and reaching the vertebrae beneath. The bear clamped its jaws onto the back of his upper torso and neck area, applying enough force to crush the cervical spine through his protective layers. The bear then dragged his body away from the shelter, driven by starvation to drag him several yards away from the shelter before attempting to feed. Gideon's death was instantaneous from the severe spinal trauma, though the bear continued its feeding behavior for several minutes before the storm intensified and drove the animal to seek shelter elsewhere. Search and rescue operations could not begin until the storm subsided 3 days later, when satellite emergency beacons finally transmitted clear distress signals. Recovery teams found evidence of the bear attack and the extensive damage to the camp's protective systems. Investigation revealed that the storm's intensity had exceeded all Weather Service predictions, overwhelming safety equipment designed for normal Arctic conditions. The bear responsible was never located, having likely moved on in search of other food sources. Wildlife officials emphasized that the attack resulted from equipment failure during extreme weather, rather than any deficiency in the researchers' safety protocols. Gideon's family released statements supporting continued Arctic research while calling for enhanced emergency shelter designs capable of withstanding severe storm conditions. The incident prompted reviews of safety standards for remote research stations, leading to improved storm-resistant fence designs and backup power systems for critical safety equipment. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.